Hey there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and smash that like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. And if you are watching on YouTube, let me go ahead and apologize for my appearance. I now have 14 stitches above my left eye, and my left eye is swollen pretty badly. It turns out, and I guess I always assumed this, but never really knew for sure. Turns out headbutting the corner of a dresser in the middle of the night, it can take a toll on your head. Hey, dead leg, how are you?
Hey, dead eye. Dead eye dick.
Oh, my God.
Why don't you really look into that camera? Can we get the full thing?
I'm gonna wear the hat for the rest of the episode. Just because it covers most of it up, but in the spirit of transparency,
yes, go ahead.
And to let people who might be watching the Veterans Classic on Friday night know what they're going to be dealing with on the sideline, take a look at this nonsense.
Oh my God! Yeah, he's taking it off. Oh my gosh! Look at our guy. Look at our guy. If you are obviously a lot of people listen to the podcast and don't watch, you can follow Eye on College Basketball Podcast. Go to the YouTube channel. By the way, the fastest way to get the podcast is to watch live on YouTube. That's the fastest way. So a reminder there. GP just showed you. You legitimately look like you got into a boxing match, man. And so let me be clear here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk plenty about college hoops, but we have to acknowledge this right off the jump because, one, this is like literally – this might actually impact your vocation, your day-to-day life here. You're supposed to be on – television in 2 days doing sideline duty. Dude, 14 stitches. And so what, you got into a fight with a dresser in the middle of the night here? What exactly happened, man?
Okay, so if you go back and watch the Leaky Black episode, and shouts to Leaky Black, he was tremendous. I appreciate all the nice responses we got for doing that. He was like, having Leaky Black was going to be fun no matter what, just because it's Leaky Black and he's a part of the podcast. But like having him actually be good, you never know if a student athlete is going to be comfortable in that setting and interesting in that setting. And I thought he was just tremendous. I hope he plays basketball forever, but if he ever wants to have a job in this part of the business, he seems equipped to be able to do that. Smart guy, sharp guy. He was a lot of fun to talk to. But if you go back and watch that on YouTube, you'll know, and watch it closely, you'll see a few times where I clearly hit the mute button on my mic and I was coughing. And that's because at some point on like late Friday night, early Saturday, I developed a cough. Now, keep in mind, we had just been at Disney World for a week, flying there, flying back, you're in Space Mountain with 1 million people. I had been exposed to a lot of people, and I've had 4 COVID shots and a flu shot. So I'm just broadly speaking, not that concerned about it. My kids are vaccinated. My wife's vaccinated. I was like, we'll be fine. Come back home, not feeling so well by Friday night, Saturday morning, but I'm getting through it. And I'm not the type that when I don't feel well, I just shut it down. My wife's always like, I don't feel well. I have to get in bed and lay there all day. And I'm like, I don't feel well, but I'm going to, I was going to go play golf. So I'm going to go play golf. I don't feel well, but I got to work. I'm going to work. I just plunged through it. And that's what I was doing the Leaky Black episode. Even played golf on Sunday, not feeling well, but I was coughing pretty considerably. Took a COVID test that came back negative. So I'm like, okay, well, I just got a common cold then. It's probably not the flu because I know you can get the flu after a flu shot, but I've literally never had the flu after a flu shot. And so I was like, it's probably not the flu. No, it's not COVID. It's just a cold. I've got a cough. It'll be fine. I'll swig Dayquil. Went and played golf Sunday. Was coughing the entire round, so much so that my guys who I'm playing with were like, yo, man, you must have that long COVID or something. Like you got to get this under control.
Like during their backswings, it's just rough. Yeah,
it was. I mean, I was coughing the whole time. Yeah. It became a running joke throughout the round. Get home and I already wasn't feeling well, and I just said, all right, I'm going to bed early. Like I'm tired. I don't feel well. This is probably a good night to just call it a night early. Went to bed at 9:30. That's the earliest I've been in my own bed asleep in a long time. Went to bed at 9:30. At some point, pitch black dark, around midnight or so, I wake up in the middle of the night and I am coughing so uncontrollably that I feel like I'm about to choke to death lying down. and I sort of jump up because I've got to get this cough under control. Now, keep in mind, we just got back from vacation. My wife's store had its 5-year-old birthday party on Saturday. So she's been totally consumed with that. I've been consumed with work. Kids got baseball. Point being, our house was kind of a wreck. Like, there's just stuff everywhere. Suitcases that probably should be put up ain't quite put up yet. Just stuff laying around the floor. Well, I get up in the middle of the night and I'm coughing uncontrollably, and I'm trying to get it under control, and I'm coughing, stumble over something, headbutt. We have a tall dresser in our bedroom, and I headbutted. I mean, it's obviously not too tall, or else I couldn't have headbutted the corner of it. Tall, my man. But it was. Let's say I'm almost 5'8". The corner of the thing is maybe like 5'2". And when I stumbled while coughing, headbutted the corner of it. Big gash. And it was obvious very quickly that I had a big problem. Then we debated going to the emergency room or not. I said, I don't feel like I'm not hurting. I don't feel concussed. I don't feel disoriented. I know I'm cut, but I don't have much interest in going to an emergency room in the middle of the night. Let's just wait till the morning, call our friends who are doctors and see what they recommend. So we waited. I went to a plastic surgeon on Monday. Got 14 stitches. They'll be in until next Tuesday, which means more or less this is what I'm going to look like on the sideline for the Veterans Classic on Friday night. My apologies in advance to Kelvin Sampson.
There's always something, man. Start of a season with this podcast. It was 2 years ago. I had a dead deer in my yard. There's always something going on. We're providing content. I'm glad you're feeling better. That's unreal. Shouts to Kevin B in the chat. He just said he calls it a dresser. Many call it a nightstand. And that is a good line. Yeah, man. I hope that eye is like you need to.
Speaking of, like what? Just to show you, I'm not faking. I still have a cough. I'm struggling, man. I'm struggling.
I can.
Oh, and here's the way we know it was we now know it was the flu. Guess who's downstairs right now in bed with the flu? My 5-year-old. He actually went to the doctor, got diagnosed with the flu yesterday. So I clearly passed it to him.
Hopefully your family's feeling better here as quickly as possible. We actually, on the previous pod I mentioned, we actually, wife and I just got our flu shots a couple of days ago there. Man, oh man. Yeah. If you got to hit that little cough button there as many times as you need to, don't worry. I got you, buddy. And hopefully you're feeling better. Yeah. Get the frozen bag of peas on that eye as often.
Yeah, I've been keeping
because I saw you shared the photo in our CBS Choops Slack room, and like it didn't look great, but it looked manageable. Dude, you're 4 times worse now than what you were.
I know. Like in truth, on Monday afternoon after I got the stitches, I reached out to my bosses at CBS Sports Network, and I said, hey, listen, I want to be clear. I feel fine. I just don't look fine, and I know I don't ever look like Evan Washburn or Tracy Wolfson or any accomplished sideline reporter. I know I start from a place of disadvantage, but like now I don't even look good relative to my own low standards. And so I sent a selfie, and they were like, "Oh, it'll be fine. We'll even have fun with it." But you are right; it looks way worse today than it looked on Monday, and it looks way worse today than it looked last night. Like when I went to bed last night, it was not swollen like this. And when I woke up this morning, my wife looked at me and she was like, you're not going to be able to be on TV. And so I still think I'm going to be on TV. It just is what it is. But I am compelled to send a updated selfie to my bosses and just say, before I get on this plane, like this is what you're dealing with. Is everybody comfortable with it? I'm comfortable with it, but I got to make sure everybody else is. What
programming note on that, just so our listeners know, we're back in the swing of the season. Sunday night episodes, Wednesday mornings, Friday mornings. For the most part, we're going to try and do our Wednesday and Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, 8 Pacific. 11 a.m. Wednesday, Friday shows for the most part, except when obviously schedules intervene, and we'll move around as need be. Again, the quickest way to get the show is to watch it live on YouTube. But with that being said, if Parrish is on, if his CBS Sports Network duties continue as planned, we are actually going to go live Thursday evening to preview the weekend and talk about the games because, frankly, there's not a ton to talk about game-wise. We'll get to that very topic in just a second. If, for whatever reason, GP is pulled off a sideline, Then we will go Friday morning, 11 Eastern, as usual, barring you having to go to the doctor or whatever like that. And we will pick our 5 games for the weekend, et cetera, et cetera. The quickest way to know when exactly that podcast is going to go up is obviously to be following us on social media, in addition to on CBB Podcast on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just a schedule tweak for this week, if indeed you wind up doing TV stuff, which I think you'll wind up doing Friday.
Yeah, I my plan is still to go work, and like I've already checked into my flight. But the reason we wouldn't be able to go Friday morning then is because we have a doubleheader Friday night at the U.S. Naval Academy, Houston St. Joseph's, Princeton Navy, and the shoot-arounds are all Friday morning. 4 shoot-arounds that I'm going to be attending in theory on Friday morning. So how about this? If I'm in Annapolis, Maryland tomorrow, we will be podcasting on Thursday night. If for some reason I am not in Annapolis, Maryland, we'll just podcast on Friday morning. We'll let you know soon as we know. So that's that. We're now through 2 days of the college basketball season. There have been, unfortunately, 0 marquee games to date, which is a real bummer. So I want to start by asking you this, merely for the people who might not understand, because this doesn't really happen in other sports. Baseball has opening day, and it's a big thing. The NFL has that Thursday night opener, and it's a big thing. The NBA has a season opening doubleheader featuring the reigning champions every year, and it's a big thing. And in college basketball, we started with every top 25 team in action against an outclassed opponent. Literally every top 25 team opened on Monday with a game in which they were double-digit favorites, and they all won. So for people who might not understand what we're dealing with, can you, Deadleg, please explain why this season started, A, in competition with Monday Night Football and the midterm elections, and then B, with exactly 0 compelling matchups between ranked teams?
Right. That's the big issue. And there were a couple obviously notable results. We'll get to that in just a little bit here. But as to the issue of the schedule, it was a problem this season. Hopefully it's not a problem next season, the season after. Normally, obviously, in the past 5-6 years, college basketball changed its opening day from the Friday night of that, in November, second Friday, to Tuesday, so that it's not competing with Monday Night Football. You have the Champions Classic, because I want to be as quick as possible as this. Okay, so every college basketball season works backward from the Masters, okay? The Masters is predetermined every single season. The Final Four always happens the Monday before the Masters gets played, and then you have X amount of weeks in a given season that get played, and then you work backward from that. Because of the way the calendar broke this season, not the 7th of November, the 6th of November is not always on the same day of the week, right? And you have the election year. You'll recall that in 2020, there was actually a push to have no NCAA action of any kind on election days. No practices, no games, no nothing. There was pushback on that. And so now it's more of, it's an initiative to, if you feel like you can not play games on an election day and not practice, by all means, go ahead and do that. For the most part, that wound up being true. There were only a handful of games on Tuesday night on election night. There were some games, including one that we at least got to mention here before we get out of this podcast. But for the most part, there weren't. So what happens then? Champions Classic gets booted back a week because of this. You don't have that, tentpole event to kick off the season, which is unfortunate because that is a major event. And every season since the Champions Classic has been a thing, Parrish has gone to it. I've gone to it almost every season. Guess what? It's not happening this year. It's a week into it. We won't even be at this. So everyone scheduled games on Monday night. The problem is coaches are cowards. They will not schedule. If they can avoid it, they are not going to open up their schedule against a legitimate opponent because, we do have good games coming in the next week. We've got the Champions Classic. We've got Gonzaga, Texas, Baylor, Virginia, Indiana, Xavier, Villanova, Michigan State, UCLA, Illinois, Maryland, St. Louis, Florida, Florida State, and more. Those are all coming in the next week. We have really, really good games. But if you give coaches the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't get to control my conference schedule. The leagues and TV determines when we play, who we play in the league play. The only thing I have control over to a limited extent is my non-conference schedule. So any bit of control that they can take, they're going to take advantage of. And coming off an off season, particularly when the portal and all the transfers therein, it's never been, there's never been a higher volume than the past 2 seasons. More than 3,600 players have entered the transfer portal in the past 2 years. They are going to want to play a home game against a quad 3 or quad 4 opponent for the most part. You might squeeze in a quad 2 there, but there's nothing of note there. They are not, if they are not forced, they are not going to open up with a challenging opponent. Penny Hardaway is one exception to this. He did go on the road. They did beat Vanderbilt. That's actually a very good win for Memphis, which now is kind of play with house money next week when it plays at St. Louis, as mentioned in the previous pod. Memphis is the only program at the power conference level or power conference designation that is opening its season with 2 road games. I wish coaches were less afraid, coaches that have a lot of job security, but the reason this happened is twofold. The election year pushes back Champions Classic a week, and then coaches have control over their non-conference schedules. They are going to do this every single time. The other thing to this, by the way, is that there's some murmurs out there that if the genie might be out of the bottle in the Champions Classic, and I hope this is not the case, but there's definitely some hushed concern over this, I guess, with Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, and Michigan State not as of this moment not being absolutely all on board to going back the way it was and having it be, if we can play 1 or 2 games against inferior competition, just let us warm up. Let us ramp up before we get into this big high profile event. Man, we really prefer that. Obviously for the sport, that's not the better thing. Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan State, for the most part, have fared just fine by opening their seasons for the past decade by playing one of those other teams in the Champions Classic. It should continue. We need a big event just to help kick off the season. I certainly hope it goes back to that, but I'm told that there's no guarantee right now it's going to go back to that. Hopefully, ESPN's obviously the one that broadcasts that event. Hopefully ESPN can put its foot down and really insist that it happens, because it's good for college basketball television. It's good for the sport. And that's where we're at. It's unfortunate that we are opening up the, our first Wednesday podcast of the season by talking about your unfortunate situation, looking like you went up against Tyson and now, not having a lot of great games on the schedule until we get to Friday, but that's the reality of where we are.
This is why you've got to have somebody looking out for the sport as opposed to everybody looking out for themselves. Like on the opening weekend of college football this season, we had number 5 Notre Dame at number 2 Ohio State, number 11 Oregon against number 3 Georgia, number 7 Utah at Florida, number 23 Cincinnati at number 19 Arkansas. If football coaches like Nick Saban can be convinced to open with interesting games in the spirit of what's good for the sport, then there is no good reason basketball coaches shouldn't be able to be convinced to do the same. There's literally nothing that can happen to you in a college basketball opener outside of a serious injury to a marquee player that will change your season in any meaningful way. If you win the game, great. If you lose, it's not really a big deal. So the truth is, and I understand the way the calendar works, but these are all things that can be worked around and should be worked around. The truth is every year, even election years, the season should start on a non-football day, and the opening day schedule should at the very least include 2 interesting matchups to fill a 7 o'clock window and a 9 o'clock window. That should not be too much to ask. Like the Philadelphia 76ers don't say, hold up. We'd like to open at home against the Thunder to ease into this thing. No, the NBA says we need marquee games to start this thing. So we're going Sixers at Celtics and Lakers at Warriors. And if you win, lose, whatever, but we've got to pop this thing off right. And college basketball does not do it. It shouldn't be too much to ask, because the alternative to what I'm suggesting is what we're dealing with. And the way we started the season is just super duper lame.
I agree. And we're going to get a lot of really the rest of November. Once we're going to have, we'll get to the Michigan State Gonzaga aircraft carrier game on our next episode. We'll preview that. That's going to be a good one. But that's really the only major one this week. And the rest of November is going to be very good. But you just, you want to best set up the sport for success. And this is what happens when you give coaches the power. Yes, they need to have their hand forced. Otherwise, we're where we are, and all top 25 teams getting a win. Although, yes, a couple got scared. We can get to that as well. But if the sport can somehow find a way to ensure that this doesn't happen again, you're going to set it up for success moving forward. And yes, starting on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night would be best every year going forward.
So despite the lack of compelling matchups to start the season, there have been some interesting results. Houston's Kelvin Sampson recorded his 700th career victory. TCU, which is ranked 14th in the AP poll, barely got past Arkansas Pine Bluff. USC lost to Florida Gulf Coast. Oklahoma lost to Sam Houston. Florida State lost to Stetson. Cal lost to UC Davis. Georgetown, bless them, needed OT to top Coppin State. We're going to get into some of that stuff next. But first, a word from our partners.
The UEFA Champions League on Paramount Plus. 9 months of heart-stopping, hold-your-breath exhilaration. That's brilliant! With more magic and more drama. While a former Bavarian nails the back of the net in Barcelona, an American trades his stars with zebra stripes, and a Norwegian creates sky blue spectacles. Oh, so stream every sweat-soaked second of regulation time, stoppage time, and extra time. Beyond magnificent! This is the best of the best of the best. This is the UEFA Champions League. Stream every match live, exclusively on Paramount Plus.
So Deadleg, as noted, it has not been a compelling start to the season, but I've still been watching. I know you've been watching. What, if anything, has stood out to you?
TCU really almost getting knocked over by Pine Bluff, I think was that and Florida State getting toppled by Stetson were the two biggest ones from opening night. Florida State, a projected NCAA tournament team. I had him in the top 40 of my rankings. Leonard Hamilton, his team really give credit to Johnny Jones, who's been patiently and diligently trying to build something there at Stetson, getting a no doubt about it kind of win. That's where obviously this can backfire on you if you're trying to schedule what you think will be an easy team at home. A lot of teams really flirted with fire there, and Florida State wound up getting burned in a way that will. I would still project Florida State to make the NCAA tournament. We are one game in to a 30-plus game schedule before we get to the NCAA tournament. But if Florida State is a bubble team, losing at home to Stetson, and I actually love this about college basketball. Once we get into like early March, you start to hear a little bit of that out of date, outmoded thinking where how you're playing then should matter more than every game counts. Every game counts equally. And so if you can't beat Stetson on your home floor, no matter when that game happens, yes, it should have a significant impact on your NCAA tournament case. We'll see if that winds up being the case there. I couldn't help but notice the fact that TCU, Creighton got a decent push. It wound up pulling away.
Yeah, they ended up winning by double digits. So if you just look at it, you're like, oh, well, Creighton won by double digits. It's fine. But they were in trouble for a minute.
And that's St. Thomas, a program that the Tommies, shouts to the Tommies, they've only been D1 for this is second season. They got a push there. So TCU and Creighton ranked higher in the preseason than ever before in program history. I couldn't help but notice that. I'll also, by the way, I had this in my notes. I forgot to bring it up. Florida State didn't have their big Spanish freshman, Bob Miller, who's out for 16 games because of just a whole bunch of nonsense. He shouldn't be suspended that long, but he is. And had he been on the floor, I don't know if it would have made it. Stetson played that well, but we do have to at least note that he wasn't. He wasn't there.
He should have enrolled at Memphis. They would have played him no matter what.
You're actually right. You're right about that.
Dean Bona as well should have gone to Memphis.
That is
Memphis does not care when the NCAA says you got to sit somebody out. They're just going to play them no matter what.
And look what happens when that happens.
These young people aren't paying attention.
On the note of Creighton, shouts to Rush the Court pointed this out recently on Twitter, reminded me. So in each of the past 3 seasons, at least one preseason AP top 10 team went on to be unranked at the end of the season. And it's actually happened 16 times overall, 16 instances in the past 10 seasons. So it happens pretty much every single season. And in some seasons, we have multiple instances of that. Looking at the preseason top 10 this season, it's, I think the teams that are in there are Creighton, Arkansas, Duke, that are the 3 candidates, only because of Creighton's early struggles. Arkansas has a whole new roster. Duke has a new coach. I don't think Creighton will be that, but those are the 3 teams that I think would be most likely. We'll see if it winds up happening in recent seasons. A year ago, it was Michigan. Year before that, it was Wisconsin. And we also had Duke and Kentucky. Those were all preseason top 10 teams 2 seasons ago. They didn't wind up ranked. You go back in recent history, it's been Florida, Carolina, USC, Xavier, Wichita State, Texas have all been preseason top 10 teams to finish unranked at the end of the season. We'll see if that winds up being the case there. I've got a couple other observations, but I want to volley this back to you. What stood out to you? What takeaways do you have from the first 2 nights of the season?
Well, what you noted, obviously, like I'm obviously paying close attention to the ranked teams that are playing because I've got to update the top 25 and 1 every morning. And so I'm sort of, creating the comments for that piece in real time. Like I'm waiting for the Kentucky game to go final so I can go ahead and knock that comment out. All right, there's one. Because I had to write 25 new comments on Monday night. The only team in the top 25 and 1 that did not play Monday was Purdue, which played Tuesday, and just like everybody else, won. Got pretty impressive performances from a couple of freshman guards. One borderline top 100, another borderline top 200. Both started for Purdue and looked comfortable. And it was another reason to believe that despite the roster turnover and the lack of obvious talent in the program, Purdue under Matt Painter is probably going to be good again. That's why I have them in the top 25 and 1. I believe in Matt Painter. We've talked about that before. So I'm following all that stuff and watching TCU get pushed and Creighton get pushed. Obviously interesting. Another thing that stood out, a lot of marquee freshmen did not play. Derek Lively didn't play. Dariq Whitehead didn't play. Nick Smith did not play at Arkansas. And Adeem Bona, I mentioned, did not play at UCLA. So some of the biggest names projected lottery picks weren't available for various reasons in the season opener. But Jet Howard was. And this is somebody we've talked about a lot. And I'm not going to proclaim victory just yet, but I had consistently the entire offseason said, with all due respect to the recruiting analysts, because they see these guys way more than I see these guys. I always acknowledge that. And my evaluation of Jet Howard was a small sample size. But when I saw him, he looked like a 5-star, possible one-and-done NBA draft pick. And yet he was ranked outside of the top 40 in his high school class. And it was just a season opener against Purdue Fort Wayne. I'm happy to wait with the rest of you and see how this plays out. But he looked the part. He was 8 of 15 from the field, 5 of 10 from 3, got 21 points, 5 assists, and looked like he's got a chance to be one of the best freshmen in the country, even if, broadly speaking, he isn't ranked that way.
No, he looked wonderful. And I do expect him to be among the most notable. That was good to see. Other ones that stood out, freshmen, just real quick, aside from Jet, who looked good against Purdue Fort Wayne. Grady Dick might have had the best night of any freshman. I mean, Grady Dick was, again, Grady Dick is his name. He looks like you think he looks. 23 points for Kansas and was, I was checking in here and there. They won 89-64 over Omaha. But what I did see there, he would look like the most important player and the best player on the floor in that one. So he had a big night. Keontae George, both are. No, you have Nick Smith, freshman of the year. I have Keontae George, national freshman of the year. He went for 13 points, 7 assists, 6 boards, only 1 turnover. In Baylor's, Mississippi Valley State's considered, bottom 5 team, according to Ken Pom. They rolled them, but Keontae George had a good college opener. Cason Wallace played well, 15 points in his debut for Kentucky, along with 9 assists and 6 rebounds, a pair of steals as well. I thought he did well for himself. And then 2 more to note. Duke was shorthanded. Mark Mitchell actually did well for himself. 18 points, just 2 assists, but he had a block and a steal. Duke got a push from Jacksonville early, 171-44. They've got so many good freshmen. No Lively, no Whitehead. Mark Mitchell steps up, and he has a good one. And then another team, hit on a couple teams that almost got toppled. South Carolina almost lost to South Carolina State. They only won by 3. Gigi Jackson had 18 and 10 in that game. So the freshman had a really nice game and a nice debut in Gamecock threads. But South Carolina State nearly pulled it off. And I had 2 people who have been in to see South Carolina in the past month reach out and say, because I had South Carolina in my top 101. They're like, you might be right, but it's looking like it could be a long season. So we'll see. Like, just not rave reviews behind the scenes about how the team, they're under first-year coach, they need time. But those opinions were reflected in the final score and the way that South Carolina actually got its skin of its teeth win against South Carolina State. So those were some freshmen to me that stood out. One more close one. Oh, well, we got to get to two, right? Both in the Big East. Providence got a scare from Ryder. The Bronx had the ball down 1, 5 seconds to go, and then one of their players tripped over himself. It spoiled even a chance to get off a potential shot to win the game with an upset. So Providence dodges one. They did not play good defense at all in the first half, but they get the win. And then, oh my, Georgetown wound up pulling away in overtime. But Coppin State had a little bit of a crazy sequence to tie the game on a 3-pointer. Coppin State was leading down the stretch against Patrick Ewing's team, which, it's been almost 11 months since they actually even won a game. They did get the win. Hoyas got the win. Noisy night in D.C. Of course, I'm only referring to what happened on the basketball floor. And they got the win, but my goodness, Georgetown fans, I know you're tired of this, but to open the season, Coppin State, nearby program, Juan Dixon leading that school, that would have been a huge yikesy. It already was noisy enough that it got to overtime. It was like the only game of real note. Providence got a little run, but Georgetown, because they hadn't won a game, GP, in so long, they get the win, but it does not portend to a significant turnaround this season under Ewing.
Yeah, I went from focusing, my office, I've obviously, like most people in our jobs, have lots of different screens available. And I went from focusing on cable news, the midterm elections, to, all right, I guess I'm going to have to put the volume up on Georgetown and pay a little closer attention to this. And we've talked about this before. I'm not a Georgetown fan, but I'm a fan of college basketball. And I was thinking about this last night. Georgetown might really be the first university that I was aware of, if this makes sense, because it was such a big brand in college basketball when I was a kid. It was like I just knew Georgetown existed in a way that I don't even think at the time I knew Ole Miss existed, And this is as somebody growing up in Mississippi.
That school for me, by the way, is Louisville, which I lived at in the mid '80s when they were good, and so I happen to live in the city, and so yeah, mine is Louisville at the time in the
Metro.
There
I was
we go.
Raised on the Metro Conference. Shouts to Purvis Ellison. So it's like Patrick Ewing. I obviously lived in the suburbs of Memphis. And this is when Memphis had Keith Lee as a big, and he was a multi-year first-team All-American. He was a comparable college player to Patrick Ewing. Not a similar NBA prospect, although he was a top 15 pick in the draft. But he had an incredible 4-year career at the collegiate level, same as Patrick did. And so this was always the thing. The 85 championship game was supposed to be Georgetown against Memphis State, Keith Lee against Patrick Ewing. This is my childhood I'm telling you about. And then, of course, Villanova upsets Memphis and Villanova upsets Georgetown. But that's a big thing in my childhood. Big John Thompson, Patrick Ewing, Georgetown Hoyas. And to watch that program go from that, and it was like people – I think sometimes people go, well, Georgetown hadn't been Georgetown in forever. JT3 took Georgetown to a Final Four and was pretty consistently good at Georgetown until it undeniably tapered off.
They had some issues with double-digit C's after that Final Four run. But
yes, but go look at JT3's Wikipedia page and ask Georgetown fans if right now they'd take that all over again.
Right. Yes.
In a second. So it didn't just fall off after Big John, but it was a monster of a program. And then just to see it go winless in the Big East last season and then struggle with Coppin State in the opener. I had no money on this game. It wasn't going to impact the top 25 and 1. I swear to you, hand the heart last night, I'm going, come on, Georgetown, just figure this out. Don't lose. I feel bad for Patrick. You know how badly he wants to not be the face of a program that is operating, at the place it's been operating for a while. How badly he must want to get this to a good place, and maybe he still will. I hope so. I just think it would be cool to see Patrick Ewing being great at Georgetown, but they had a 21-game losing streak going into last night and then needed overtime to get past Coppin State. I'm glad it ended well, because if you're a Georgetown player this morning, somebody says, hey, how did things go last night? We won by double digits. Just keep it at that. We won by double digits, but they needed overtime to get past Coppin State, and we're very close to losing. That was not an encouraging season opening performance.
Georgetown did not win its season opener a year ago at home, lost to Dartmouth. KenPom projects Georgetown to go 6-14 in the Big East. I think we both would take the under on that. So someone find us right when the Big East is about to start and remind us of our predictions here, because we will forget them. GP, I will set it at 3.5 wins in Big East play. Will you go over or under for the Georgetown Hoyas this season?
Well, I think 2 days ago, I probably said just over. Somebody will be sick on another team. Somebody will turn an ankle. You'll win a couple of games at home. You're not supposed to. They'll get there, and they still might. But it's not like, hey, maybe Coppin State's better than we thought. Like Charlotte pounded Coppin State was on the second night of a back-to-back.
Crazy, right? That's the thing about it. Not to mention that in the YouTube chat, they played the night before and lost 82-59 at Charlotte. Charlotte, which, they're trying to get back to somewhat glory days, but they're a middle of the sport team. They're like, in CUSA, they're a middle of the pack team. And then they absolutely got routed by them. They come back a day later and they almost peel it off at Georgetown. That's what kind of made it even wilder.
Right. And so I'm not optimistic, but maybe we'll look up and we'll go, hey, that was just a really terrible first game for Georgetown, but they look much better, in the subsequent weeks. But I'm not sure.
I'll say over. I said it at 3.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna say over as well, just because you should be able to win 4 Big East games.
Well, they went 0-20 last year.
I know what they did.
They went 0-20. They did not win 1. If we had said it at 0.5, they would not. But I will say over. I will say over as well. Yeah. That's probably the majority of, any other notable.
Well, I do want to touch on the top of the American Athletic Conference real quick, because there was a couple of notable things there. One, congratulations to Kelvin Sampson. Got his 700th career win. Mm-hmm. And this is a man who spent, several years out of the sport after being forced to resign at Indiana. So if that never happens, if he never has to be forced out at Indiana, where is Indiana basketball now? And how many wins does Kelvin Sampson have? And does he have a national championship already? All of that stuff is probably in play. Yep. As we've talked about before, you even go look at that last team he had at Indiana. That was a legitimate national championship contender. And then Dan Dockich took it over and ran it straight into the ground, immediately, just torpedoed it. It's unbelievable how he took a great thing and just made it awful. But there's other examples of that in his own life, I think. So, But Kelvin could have won a title that year, and if not that year, then in the subsequent years. But either way, after being forced out at Indiana, taking a total rebuilding situation at Houston, and missing several years of being a Division I men's basketball coach, he's still at 700 career victories, and I think arguably, if not undeniably, has his best chance ever right now to actually win a national championship. As of yesterday morning, North Carolina and Gonzaga, according to Caesar Sportsbook, North Carolina and Kentucky, rather, according to Caesar Sportsbook, had the best odds to win the national championship, but Houston was third. And obviously, if you watch the season opener, it was against an outclassed opponent, but they just overwhelmed them. And it was nice to see Kelvin get that 700th win, and he'll go for 701 on Friday night at the U.S. Naval Academy in the Veterans Classic.
Trivia time.
Okay, let's go.
I got 2 of them.
All right.
There's going to be one other coach that gets to 700 this season. Do you know who it is?
Jim Larinaga.
Bada bing.
I know it because I just was looking at it last night.
All right. Jim Larinaga sitting at 697. Let me bring up the Miami schedule real quick for you right here. So 697 for Coach L, as they call him. Coach L got a win, got a dub against Lafayette. No, not a lot of drama there. So UNC Greensboro, 698, Florida A&M, 699. And then, right up here in my state of Connecticut, win number 700 could come maybe against Providence at Mohegan Sun next Saturday. Okay.
So you got another trivia time.
Yeah. Part of it. Now I wondered if you researched this, but I'll ask it anyway. And plus it's something for our listeners to learn. All right. How many active coaches have 700 or more wins in men's D1?
I was going to ask you this, and then I was like, I don't feel like looking it up. So I just
amazing how we're on the same. I wondered if you might look it up as well. I was like, if he tries to trivia time me with this, I'm not going to even. I won't.
So obviously, Bob Huggins.
Yes.
John Calipari.
841 at the D level for Bob Huggins.
Yeah. John Calipari.
Calipari, yes, he's at 768. Some of these are NCAA vacated adjusted, but yes.
Whatever. Jim Boeheim.
How about this on Jim Boeheim? Jim Boeheim obviously has the most of any active coach. Boeheim was on the sideline for his 1100th victory. Okay, I'll phrase it that way. Boeheim was on the sideline for his 1100th victory on opening night against Lehigh. But because 101 wins have been taken away from him, he's now sitting at 999 in the eyes of the NCAA, meaning if Syracuse beats Colgate in its next game, that won't be an easy one. Colgate's good. But if Syracuse beats Colgate in its next game, Jim Boeheim will make history. He'll become the first coach to ever win 1,000 games twice. So
it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Jim Boeheim has overseen 1,100 wins at Syracuse. That's the number that I choose to recognize. The NCAA technically has him sitting at 999. He will, when his career ends, most likely surpass Mike Krzyzewski for having the most, overseeing the most victories in the history of D1. Whatever.
So, Matt, how many have we named now?
You have named Huggins. The question is how many there are. You have named Huggins. We got obviously Sampson's baked in. Boeheim, Calipari. I think you got those 4. So we need more, but I don't want to tell you how many more because I need the number.
All right, I'm just going to try to talk through it. Bill Self is there, I think.
Right, 763. That's 5.
Is Rick Barnes there already?
That's right. 754. That's 6. You might have mentioned another coach. I just don't remember if you mentioned it or not. I think you did. Did you mention Patino?
No, but he was in my head. Patino.
Okay. We'll give it
obviously.
to you.
Obviously.
7. We could be done at 7, or there could be more. You think through it.
Those are the only ones that pop into my head. Who am I missing? How many am I missing?
You are missing 2. There are 9 active Division I men's basketball coaches with at least 700 wins.
I feel like we talked about this at one point, and surprisingly, at least surprisingly to me, Dana Altman's name came up.
Bada bing. Dana Altman is lowest on the list. Well, now Kelvin's technically lowest. Dana Altman's at 710. The last one's tough. Not a coach of a power conference program currently. But been doing this at the D1 level since 1975.
So it's an older fella.
He's 76. He'll be 77 in December. Plays the bass.
Did he used to coach in a power conference?
That is correct.
In the SEC?
That is correct.
At Auburn?
That is correct.
Cliff Ellis.
That is right. Cliff Ellis is the 9th. He is at 894. Cliff Ellis is going to get to 900 wins. Good for him.
I remember a few years ago. This was several years ago. Cliff was coming off of some sort of surgery. I don't remember if it was a knee or a hip. The type of surgery that is, very common for a person who is at an advanced age. And he was limping into Peach Jam, and I was sitting with a younger coach, and he said, GP, I swear to God, if you ever see me walk into a gym like that, come take me and put me back on my plane and send me home and just tell me it's time. I've had a good career, but it's time to not do this anymore. But what's funny is coaches always say that when they're young.
And then
they are that guy.
That happens.
Almost none of them actually walk away.
Jay Wright walked away.
Jay Wright did. But most of the guys who say, you'll never see me coaching at 60, they're 67 right now and still coaching with no end in sight or something similar to that. So most coaches don't actually walk away the way they'd like to think that they would. But most of them do say something like that. You rarely hear a coach in his 40s talking about, oh yeah, I'm planning to still be coaching in my 70s. They almost always say, I'm gonna try to get out of here by 60. And I do think that might be more of a reality going forward.
I do too.
Just given how much money these guys make now.
Money, and then just, I don't know, the nature of the job. It's always not been an easy job, but it's more challenging than it's ever been. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this. Cliff Ellis has been rocking it hardcore at Coastal Carolina since 2007. He is still there.
Yeah, so you get a lot of you get a lot of guys who got so much money that they can go, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, which is kind of what Jay decided for a variety of reasons. So I think it might become more common, guys walking away. But for the most part, the guys, I've been doing this now for more than 20 years. And I can remember having conversations with guys 15, 20 years ago who were like, I'll never be here when I'm 60. And they're like literally still running some of the best programs in the country in their 60s right now.
That is how it goes. So what else you got?
Well, elsewhere in the American, you touched on this, but it was probably one of the most notable results for the first two nights. Memphis was the only power conference team to play a power conference team in its season opener. And the Tigers went on the road and played a Vanderbilt team that had reportedly handled Xavier pretty easily in a scrimmage the week before. And I don't know how much of this game you saw, but Memphis controlled it from start to finish. They were up by double digits early, by 19 at one point, and won the game by 9. Kendrick Davis was good. DeAndre Williams was his usual self. John Rothstein pointed this out on Twitter. It's something I've obviously mentioned before. Since DeAndre Williams enrolled at Memphis, when he plays, the Tigers are 36-12, and when he doesn't, they're just 7-7. And so what's wild is that under Penny Hardaway, that Memphis program has enrolled 5 5-star guys, including top 20 picks like Precious Achiuwa, James Wiseman, Jalen Duren. And yet you can argue quite convincingly that the most important player to the Memphis program in the Penny Hardaway era has not been a 5-star freshman, even though Penny has had 2 top-ranked recruiting classes. The most important player of the Penny Hardaway era is actually a 26-year-old transfer from Evansville. And that be the case. Memphis has one terrific college basketball player in Kendrick Davis, another very good one in DeAndre Williams, and then just a bunch of role players. And they look like a pretty good college basketball team. They're really old. According to KenPom, literally the most experienced team in the country. Now, they don't have a lot of experience playing together, but they've got a lot of experience at the Division I level. Penny only played 7 guys, at least 15 minutes. Rotation was short. Everybody seemed to understand their roles. Even DeAndre Williams said, one of the differences between the start of this season and the start of last season is that, nobody's on the bench complaining about playing time. Nobody's complaining about shots. Everybody understands their role, and it was a nice first impression. And now Memphis goes on the road once again on Tuesday to play St. Louis. If they were to win that one, and that's going to be tough. St. Louis is good, and then come home and beat VCU. They would open the season with 3 straight wins over top 100 KenPom teams and might be able to break into the Associated Press top 25 poll on the subsequent Monday.
Yeah. I didn't have Vandy in my top 101 entering the season. They are that at KenPom. They're 74 right now. We'll see. That'll probably be a quad 2 win at worst, hopefully for Memphis. The benefit here is that if you're able, now it's a little bit of a house money situation. St. Louis will be a tough one to pull off, but if you get it, my goodness, talk about really benefiting your at-large case down the road. Why these games do matter. I went on your radio show earlier this week and said that very thing. These things can have really strong downstream effects once we get to trying to figure out whether you should be in or out. And if you're in, seed line, knock them up a spot, right? So we'll see if they can pull it off. They got the road win under their belt. That's a big one. That's a nice ad for Memphis there. And obviously an intriguing team to follow this season because, yes, it's Kendrick Davis. We'll see. It's not unthinkable he could be the American Player of the Year. Houston's got dudes, no doubt about it. But if Kendrick Davis winds up being the guy who truly changes the game for Memphis, then maybe, he's certainly good enough. He's one of the best guards in the country there. And then DeAndre Williams, what do you want me to say, Parrish? You have a 26-year-old on your roster that is going to make a difference. Yes, there's a lot of teams have a lot of old guys. Those old guys are 22, some 23. Dude's 26. 26. He has lived a life. He's practically ready to write a memoir. I actually think that has real tangible effects on Memphis' outlook this season. We'll see if they can keep it going. They don't play again I don't know why. There's an 8-day gap. They don't play again.
Even Jerry Stackhouse after the game said, one of those guys over there used to play with me.
Exactly. And I'm sure for DeAndre Williams, the jokes have gotten old. Maybe he rolls with it. I don't know. But dude, I think it's a fun little plot line of this. He's 20. Dude is playing college basketball, 26 years old. There's got to be, is 20% of the NBA younger than him? Probably. How many guys are getting an NBA paycheck on a roster right now that are younger than DeAndre Williams? Incredible.
I should do this but I think you could do top 7 players in the Grizzlies rotation right now, top 7 players in the Tigers rotation right now, and the Grizzlies might on average be younger.
I bet you they are. They gotta be. Yeah, they gotta be top 7 in rotation.
It's close because Ja's 23 now. But like Jake LaRavia is in the rotation. David Roddy is in the rotation. They got multiple rookies in the rotation. The Grizzlies and Tigers aren't that different in terms of age.
Sounds like a radio segment for you, my man.
I'll get to it at some point. At some point. Before we get out of here, somebody did in the YouTube comments mention John Gallagher. And I do think that's worth noting because, he was a big story in the NCAA tournament a couple of years ago when he got Hartford there for the first time in school history. And, as you know, that school is now transitioning to a lower level of college basketball. And John, literally on opening day, Monday, submitted his resignation and accused the school of being in breach of contract. You talked to John and wrote the story. I texted with him. Like he's one of my favorite people. He's just like, every once in a while you'll get these random conversations. Like if you could hang out with 4 basketball coaches, who would they be? And I think we even did a Candid Coaches question on this one time. And the names that often come up are like Bob Huggins, because he's a blast, and Bill Self is a lot of fun. But like, if you get outside of the big names and you like really have been around college basketball coaches, like John Gallagher is going to be on that list for a lot of people. He's a trip. And it just, man, I hate it for him that he finds himself in this situation because he and the people who care about that program, I know I'm talking about this from a distance and there's 2 sides to every story, but I think he deserved better. And I wish he got better because I like him leading and caring deeply about that program. And I don't like him being out of the sport.
Yeah, we've got 2 coaching changes that have already happened. You had Steve Masiello, who was fired at Manhattan and now is an unpaid advisor to Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino, obviously, Mass played for him. He's now at Iona, so that's a wild one. And then, yes, Gallagher resigned on Monday. I did ask. I was like, hey, just so I'm clear, you're not going to go anywhere else. He's like, no, I'm not coaching this season. It just reached a breaking point. He did tell me, and none of our conversation was off the record. So he said, listen, I could have put a lot more stuff in that letter than I did. I could, and again, 2 sides to every story. But the absolute breaking point was when the school, now Hartford's transitioning out of Division I down to Division III, and Gallagher and many others have tried to change that and keep it a Division I program. And literally, they made the 2021 NCAA tournament for the first time. They play against Baylor, they lose against Baylor, and within 24 hours of that experience, which is so validating for a coach and a staff and a school at a level like Hartford, right? Coming out of the America East, where Vermont's dominated that conference for the better part of 10, 15 years. You break through, you make the tournament, just incredible. He learns, oh, by the way, yeah, great job, but in a few years, your school's not even going to be able to play in this thing because we're moving you down to D3. Now, I'm not even getting into the economics of their athletics part, whatever. He tried to reverse that and failed in that push. Slowly but surely over the past, year and a half, Gallagher has felt as though, the support and resources around his program have continually been stripped away, that he has been lied to, misled. And the biggest issue he had as of late, he told me he was debating resigning for a month. Okay. But the biggest issue he had was when Hartford, which still is not it's not a terrible team. It beat Dartmouth in this scrimmage that it went up and played against the Big Green. But they go up to this scrimmage at Dartmouth. Hartford doesn't send a trainer, which is not commonplace. Yes, Dartmouth had a trainer on staff, obviously. But a Hartford player winds up getting injured. And Gallagher said, I couldn't sleep. I was sick. I couldn't focus the next day. This really messed me up. I didn't like it. I was never comfortable with it to begin with, that we were driving up there. We were on a bus and there wasn't a trainer on the bus with us. It just had never happened. You don't do this, particularly if you're, Hartford's still technically a Division I institution. It's independent this season. It's out of the America East. It's going to be D3 in just a couple of years here. And so he felt, and this is quoted in the story, but he's like, the fact of the matter is the players are going to be treated better if I'm not there. The relationship between the president and myself and the athletic director and myself, like it just got to a point where it wasn't a productive situation, And so by me stepping away, him doing it, now his longtime assistant gets a chance to be the interim coach, and that's good for him and all that. But it certainly got more attention than I thought it would. But a lot of that was because of the allegations made in the letter. Now the school did refute some of that and say that some of that stuff was baseless and Gallagher wasn't, all right in what he was saying. So be it. Hartford has certainly made a mess of itself. And you know what? We're not going to be talking about Hartford basketball anymore. Not that we did much to begin with, but they're going to D3 and certainly not a way to drape yourself in glory on the way out of the Division I level.
All right. I think it's time for me to go put an ice pack on my face.
Yeah, you need to go get that taken care of, man. That's goodness gracious, man.
How about literally on the opening day of the season? Like, there's never a good time to do this. It hurts. But I could have done this in May or June, July. Oh, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
Man, oh man. Yeah. I should be good to go on our next pod. I got like a big time dentist cleaning situation later today. I got to get that done, but I got to figure that I'm good to talk tomorrow night. I better be.
If I can talk under these circumstances, you can talk.
But you can talk. It's more your appearance. You can talk. I think that I am good to go. But yes, I got a dentist appointment this afternoon.
We're off to a rough start.
I know.
It's a lot of chat. Life is full of challenges,
I hear you.
Life is full of challenges. You just try to.
Said we couldn't make this episode 55 minutes long. Well, we proved wrong yet again.
All I need is 14. Dude, I can get 55 minutes out of anything, especially on the first episode since I've had 14 stitches put above my left eye. Not a problem. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck and Larnell. And thank you guys once again for listening to the Ion College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. 5 stars, nice review. There's more of us than there are of them. Certain of that. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done that yet. We're going to talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.